I mean, I did it for 20 years.
Hmm.
At first, I didn't know what mental health was. I was
Yeah.
living with OCD, anxiety, depression, all of those
Hmm.
things. I didn't know what it was because we never talked about it growing up. Playing footy, we'd often talk, we'd joke about hurting ourselves, our bodies and all that, and we'd go see a physio or doctor, get help. But no one ever mentioned, have you seen your psychologist or a counselor, or what's
Hmm.
going on at home, what's going on at work, what's going on at school? And a lot of guys still struggle with that. I mean, and to the point where they don't talk about things, they get angry. We've got high rates of guys who are perpetrators of domestic violence, for example, in Australia.
Welcome, everyone. This is the Rising Father podcast. I'm Chris Rodack. I have Simon Rinne with me. We connected over Instagram. He's doing awesome work in the men's space, and we're going to jump right to it. So, Simon, why are men so anxious nowadays?
Well, that's a big question. Big question. Thanks, firstly, for having me on the show. Actually,
Yeah.
man, like it's really cool to connect across the globe. But why are men so anxious? I think we put too much pressure on ourselves. To put it pretty bluntly, we try to be perfect. Dads particularly, so I'm a dad, so every day I'm trying to be this perfect dad and father figure and mentor for my kids, and I don't get it right every day. And that makes me anxious. My background is one based in mental health as well, so I live with OCD and generalized anxiety as it is. So I'm prone to anxiety. But I think more broadly, yeah, men struggle because we try to be perfect.
So you have OCD.
Yeah.
Now I'm not in the mental health space. I'm a teacher, but you're much more specialized. What specifically did you do? I think you had I was scrolling your Instagram, saw that you resigned from your previous position. And so what your background?
My background, so so OCD started for me when I was 8. And for anyone who doesn't know what OCD is, it's obsessive compulsive disorder. So an obsession comes into your brain or your mind, and you can't stop thinking about it. And in order to alleviate the anxiety that comes from that kind of thought, you perform a compulsion, so a behavior or an act. So the very first OCD for me was I was in the schoolyard. I was about 8 years old. I'm 39 now. And another student told me that if I didn't talk for more than a minute, I'd lose my voice forever. Now, most people would just go, "Oh yeah, whatever. That's just bullshit." But me, as an 8-year-old, I really took that on board, and I thought that was the gospel. And so I would start humming every day for about a year and a half, and it was a small hum, like a kind of sound.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to do it so it was so quiet that nobody would hear that. But over the years, OCD for me has evolved into different things like checking behaviors around personal safety and safety for my family. And I still do it today as a 39-year-old. But going back to your question around, I've recently left my career. I've recently started up a dedicated men's mental health therapy business to support other men like me to
Mm-hmm.
open up and get help. And I think that's particularly important because I bottled things up for about 20 years before I finally said, I think I've got some mental health issues and I need to go speak to someone. And I actually thank my wife for that, because if she didn't push me to go do that, I probably would have never got help. And I probably wouldn't be a father today, because we would have
Mm-hmm.
probably, walked our different ways. So
Wow. How old are your kids?
I've got a 5-year-old boy, Gus, and a 2-year-old girl, Pippa. So we're in the midst of Gussie started prep this year, and Pippa's still in the childcare system as well. So
Yeah.
we go between sickness and tiredness every single day.
Oh my gosh, I remember that. My kids are 8 and 6. Um, it's such a big change whenever they just grow up a little bit.
Yeah,
Obviously newborn is one thing, and it's just you're responsible for every single aspect of their life. And then, you have to hold them 24/7 or else they could die. And then Once they get to toddlers and they can walk places and they're sticking their fingers in outlets and sharp objects and falling downstairs. And then now my son is like 80 pounds. He's been doing jujitsu and martial arts for 4 years, and he can like kill someone if he's playing. So it's a whole different thing. And, Lauren, my daughter, she's 6 and she's just, beautiful, cute. She trusts everyone. So, she'll go up to a complete total stranger and, get on their back and do a piggyback ride. So it's a whole another set of issues, but yeah, 5 and 2, that's crazy. Those are crazy times. And like, every year that comes is going to be crazy.
Yeah, we're doing a bit of Pokemon Go at the moment with my son Gus on the way to school. So I'm trying to teach him to navigate looking at his phone and crossing the road at the same time. It's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
But first world problems, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. Yeah, I've never played Pokemon Go. I know it was like a huge fad like a year ago. People are still doing that, but my son is super into Pokemon cards.
Yes.
He's obsessed with it. And then I did Pokemon cards whenever I was his age. I remember we had binders of like laminated Pokemon cards. And this one time, my friend who lived up the street, he gave me we called them shiny foil Pokemon cards. It was like some, stupid rare Pokemon. And I took it home, and then he showed up at my front door, knocked on the door. I looked at it was him. And he talked to my mom, and he said, "Can I have that Pokemon card back?" And I was like, "No, you can't have it back." And then my mom made me give it to him. And I remember crying in my house because I had to give this kid his Pokemon card back. I was so emotional about it. But yeah, my son loves Pokemon cards. But that's crazy. Playing Pokemon Go. I don't even want to introduce that to him. That'd be a whole nother year of my life.
Well, I mean, aside from that, Mike Gussie loves to watch YouTube and watches videos of people opening Pokemon card packets. So,
if I had only known, that's all I had to do.
Yeah.
Why couldn't someone have told me that 10 years ago? All you had to do is open stuff up on YouTube. You could be a millionaire by now.
Oh yeah, I'm still thinking about it.
You never know. Why not? Probably get more hits than my channel does. Yeah, but back to the anxiety that guys have. I did my last podcast I did. It was all about how I deal with anxiety, and how the strategies that I do to cool down, stay focused, and some of the things I talked about that I just from thinking about my own thoughts and thinking about what works for me have been like journaling was a huge one for me. Just really good for me to organize my thoughts and see everything down on paper. Do you do any journaling? Do you have your clients do that? Anything like that?
Yeah, I've got a few different strategies. So I've dabbled in journaling a little bit over the time on my own journey, but also with clients as well. But what I found is, because my platform was all about, it's called Mindful Men, and so all about bringing the mindfulness into our everyday life. But I always struggled to find out what I was mindful of and what I was grateful for. So I actually got a really cool tip from my psychologist recently, saying that when we start doing gratitude journaling, for example, and we start writing, I'm grateful for my family, I'm grateful for health, I'm grateful for having a house. But these are real big ticket items. But what he said, what you start doing is you start repeating those every second day or third day, and then you kind of lose, I guess, the connection with the whole process. But what he told me was to break our journaling day into hourly slots and just write down what you did in that time. So it could be 7 to 8, getting the kids ready for school and off to school. The next one, 9 to 10, could be a cup of coffee and a meeting with a client or whatever, and so on, and all the way through the day. And what you can do there is find those little moments of everyday life that you're grateful for, like that cup of coffee. I love coffee. So having that cup of coffee in the morning gets me perky. I love the taste. I love the smell, starts to make me feel good. And if you can find little bits of that, it could be, picking up your son from school and playing Pokemon Go on the walk home from school. Something really basic like that, an everyday thing, and that keeps you going. And because every day is different, you can find so many things that you're grateful for in that day. So I really like that strategy, and I've been using that more often than the old school, just writing down 3 things that I want to achieve that day or whatever. But with my clients as well, I love this concept. It's called the morning pages. And it's really good for people who are looking to be creative, or people that have thoughts that just go through your head like a million miles an hour. And it often happens when you first wake up in the day and you feel like you can never get ahead of your day because your
Mm-hmm.
brain is just in overdrive. So what you do is you get a notebook, and the idea is you're meant to handwrite 3 pages of thoughts as they come into your mind, and they don't, and you're not meant to make any sense of it. You're not meant to correct the grammar or anything. It's like, it could be, I saw a bus, red, blue, 169, just the thoughts as they are. And you do that for 3 pages. I never got to 3 pages because my hand would cramp up, so I didn't
Mm-hmm.
ever do 1 page myself. But by doing this, and then you don't read it, you just close it. And you do this every day when you first get up. You grab a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or your brekkie or whatever, and you do it first thing in the morning. And it just downloads all these thoughts in your mind onto a paper. You can close it, and then you can just get on with your day. You can be creative. You're clearer in your mind and your mindset for work or family life or whatever. And that's a really, really cool thing. It takes a bit of practice to get used to because you're writing so much, but it does certainly help, clear space in your brain, and also, decrease the anxiety when you wake up, and because you're not trying to battle your thoughts at the same time.
That's kind of the method that I do when I do the journaling. I don't have a structured thing. For me, it's exactly what you said. You nailed it. It was just, if all these thoughts racing through my head, I need to get them down on paper. And for me, I feel like when I get them down on paper, if I can see them, then it makes a lot more sense to me. Then they're not rattling around my head anymore.
Yeah,
Because I
because they
can't.
become words. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've got fragments of sentences that don't make any sense. But then when I put those fragments into sentences, when I take the time to do that, then for whatever reason, they kind of go away, or I can revisit them later.
Yeah. And there's some cool tips that you can use. Like, I've talked to clients before about the idea of the morning pages. You just put it on in the cupboard. You don't look at it again, and you end up having volumes and volumes of these notebooks. But for other people where thoughts have so much power over them, and in their behavior and their day-to-day life, it's a real cool trick to maybe rip out the page from the notebook and mindfully scrunch it up as hard as you can and throw
Mm,
it against the wall. Or some people, put it in a shredder. Other people burn them,
mm.
and it helps to, the thoughts then become just words on paper, and then they become destroyed, and you're mindfully doing that process and taking control back over your life. So
Have you found that with the guys that you're working with, there's something specific that runs a common theme through all of them? Like this thing culturally, or you just noticed a pattern with the guys you're working with, or that you see on social media that, hey, man, this thing's really bugging a lot of guys.
Um, I think identity is one that comes to mind. Is Who are we in 2022 as men in
Mm,
today's culture or society? I mean, I'm in Australia, so, and you're in the US, that's right. And our cultures are very similar, but our cultures compared to, the Middle East or Asia is also very different as well. And I think identity comes to it. And I've lived in about 4 different Australian states,
mm,
and over the years, I remember listening to one of your episodes around friendships. And for me, I've lost a lot of my friendships because we've moved so much, and we live in a very transient lifestyle.
mm,
2022, a lot of people do fly in, fly out work in Australia. Or now with COVID, everyone's working remotely from home, and you might not necessarily live in the city that you work, and so forth. So trying to figure out who we are and our connections to our friends and our community is tricky. Um, I've had dads that come in who don't really connect with their kids, or their partner, not really sure where they stand in the family unit. Um, I often talk about on my podcast and my platform is this battle between what is masculinity in 2022.
mm.
And I compare that to me growing up playing footy and the boys don't cry mantra, and then trying to navigate, why isn't it okay for men to talk about mental health? And it comes a lot from that social conditioning when we were a bit younger, particularly in the 90s and 80s and so forth, that men are meant to be hard and boys are meant to be hard, and to be a man you're meant to bottle everything up. So It's challenging that kind of stuff today, that it is okay for guys to cry and to talk about mental health. It doesn't make you less of a man to do that. It just means that you're probably more in tune with what's going on inside, and you can get the help if you need it.
Do you feel like a lot of guys nowadays do have that issue where they're still held back by that feeling, that or old mindset that they have to bottle everything up?
Yeah, 100%, definitely. I mean, I did it for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
At first I didn't know what mental health was. I was
Yeah.
living with OCD, anxiety, depression, all of
Mm-hmm.
those things. I didn't know what it was because we never talked about it growing up. Playing footy, we'd often talk, we'd joke about hurting ourselves, our bodies and all that, and we'd go see a physio or doctor, get help. But no one ever mentioned, have you seen your psychologist or a counselor, or what's
Mm-hmm.
going on at home, what's going on at work, what's going on at school? And a lot of guys still struggle with that. I mean, and to the point where they don't talk about things, they get angry. We've got high rates of guys who are perpetrators of domestic violence, for example, in Australia. Men are more likely to commit suicide compared to women. I did a great episode on my show with a coach in the trades, a carpenter, and young carpenters, or young tradies, should I say, are 2.3 more times more likely in Australia to commit suicide. And it all comes down to bottling things up and not talking about things. And I think there's a lot of shame and stigma associated with talking about things. I mean, I didn't go and see help because I didn't want to be on medication.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that held me back for years before I got help. And then when I've finally, said I've got to change, things have to change, and now medication is just an everyday part of my life, and it's fine. Like it actually levels me out and makes me I think a more in tune dad and person and husband and so forth. So yeah, I think there's a lot of guys still living under that old bottle things up, because that's how you be a man.
Yeah, that's tough. It depends on, like you said, where you are in the world. I was talking to another Australian 2 days ago. Almost had scheduling issues. I think I've I think I've got it figured out. Maybe. um, but he was telling me about how he's a coach also, but he deals with a lot of men in Australia who have drinking problems.
Mm.
And he observed that was a cultural thing in Australia, that a lot of the guys have. I guess it's kind of celebrated to drink. He was giving me an example of the local football team. I guess they're all celebrities, and every Monday they all go out to the bar and get smashed, and it's all over TV. And I was telling him, yeah, that nothing like that happens over, at least where I am. Like, it's that kind of thing is definitely not celebrated. And if that was celebrated, yeah, we'd have 10 times the amount of kids drinking.
Yeah. You nailed it on the head, and actually you picked out one of my next few episodes of my podcast is men's drinking culture, and I often reflect on my drinking. So in Australia, like, we can drink from 18 legally, but often, young guys would start around 16 and having parties and so forth, and getting drunk, and that's fun here, and that's what people do. But then it becomes kind of enshrined in us that, to be a man, it means drinking and getting on, whatever it is, beer, scotch, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And for many years, I would use drinking to numb my thoughts and my anxiety and my OCD. I'd get to the end of the night, if I've had a rough day, I'd be a few beers, and then everything just kind of levels out. That self-medication, but what that does, it continues a cycle of getting into drinking and drinking too much, because all of a sudden, 2 beers aren't doing it. So then you've got to do 3 or 4 beers, and then drinking becomes a bit of a social thing as well. So to be social, you need to drink, and get that courage up to go and talk to people, and yeah, it's certainly ingrained in our culture, and we see it in our sporting organisations, the sponsorship. All of our footy teams have got some sort of alcohol or betting or anything like that, emblazoned on the jerseys. And it's a bit of a problem here in Australia.
Why do you think that is? Like, we have, obviously, at sporting events, there's a lot of drinking, and there's, Miller Lite, Bud Light, Yingling, all these beer brands, but it's not really, I don't think it's celebrated. Like you would never see an article or a news story about, your local football team going to the bar and getting smashed. Like I think it might be outlawed in the US for someone to even be smoking a cigarette on TV anymore. So it's a very conservative kind of monitoring of media that happens, even more so every single year. What do you think it is in the Australian society or culture that makes drinking so prevalent?
I think it's just it's ingrained in us, and it has been for decades. It's like we're almost stuck in an 80s mindset and a 90s mindset with our drinking. We've got, cricket's big over here, the game cricket, and everyone always knows the story of there was a 80s and 90s player, David Boone, who smashed I don't know how many beers between here and a plane ride to England. I think it was probably like 50 beers. I mean, I don't know the number exactly, but it was a huge amount. And it's just celebrated. And like we had one of our prime ministers who, back in the 80s, Bob Hawke, he's famous for chugging a beer on TV. And even our current prime minister did it a couple of weeks ago, which is interesting, because there was a news article about the Finnish prime minister. She's a younger woman who's, I think, the youngest Finnish prime minister, who was caught on camera partying with her friends, and everyone's looking down on that, saying you shouldn't be doing that. But here in Australia, when our current prime minister is necking a beer at a concert or whatever, everyone's like, yeah, good on him. I really don't know. I think we're just stuck in the times. And it is so ingrained in our culture about who we are as people. I think it's this laid back, kind of larrikin type thing, that goes through the media, like movies and TV shows, and it's just stuck. And a lot of guys struggle with it. Even me, like, sometimes I want to go to networking events for social work, but they're often at a pub. And I know I struggle. Like I struggle with having one beer. So for me, it's all or nothing. I go to an event and I'm either not drinking because I'm driving, but if I have one, I don't like to get behind the wheel of a car. So sometimes I just avoid those kind of events altogether because it's just too much of a conundrum. And a lot of guys feel the same.
Networking events are the worst.
Yeah.
I did plenty of those 3 or 4 years ago. We have an ad agency, and when I first started, I know it's probably like 5 or 6 years ago, I got our first clients going to networking events, and man, that was hell.
Yeah. I've got one coming up actually, and I'm dreading it.
The awkward conversations, and then the worst is the lies people tell about why they're at networking events. I'm just here to network. I'm just here to make friends. It's like, cut the bullshit, man. We're all here for the same reason. We just want clients. Whoever has the best pitch might get someone. And amazingly, I was able to get some clients when it's weird, because it's weird because you're at this place where there's like 20, 30 people, and every single person is there because they want to find a client. So everyone knows it. You're just talking to each other, hoping that you could sell the person. Yeah. And I remember this one time, this old lady was all dressed crazy, and we did this like small group thing where everyone was at a booth, and it was almost like dating. And like they rang a bell and you go and like give your pitch to people. It's really horrible. And this lady, her niche was witchcraft. So she was like a Wiccan coach. And I remember just sitting there being like, what the hell am I doing? Like, this is not the way to get clients. This is not going to work. I mean, hopefully yours are different, but mine, I've been to plenty where, you go to the basement of this bar and there's like 3 people and you just awkwardly walk around, sit by someone at the bar, and oh God, it's the worst. It's good for building up social skills and confidence and talking to complete strangers, but it was the worst.
Well, this one's not too bad because I'm the guest speaker. So
there you go. That's better.
I put the feelers out yesterday actually, and I got a call today saying, yeah, we'd love to have you come and have a chat and have dinner with us. So.
Well, that sounds better than what I was doing. I think the Australian networking events are better than mine. Good for you. Well, let's go back to friends, because we were talking about, I did an episode on importance of friends, and I did that episode because I think it's a travesty. I think it's a disaster in mental health and for the world that so many people women too, but I'm focusing on guys, don't have any friends.
Mm.
And when I poll my community, I have a large Facebook group. When I occasionally will do polls, how many of us have friends? It's always 95% of them or more don't have a single friend. And then what bothers me more is the justifications for it. It'll be, I don't have a friend, but I don't have a friend because my kids come first.
Mm.
And that doesn't ring true. That doesn't make any sense. Those dots don't connect. That's, because you have a kid, you can't have a friend. Like that line of thinking is, to me, so bad, because for me, I need to have friends. Like I go golfing every Wednesday night with a league of like 80 guys. And even if I'm behind on some business stuff, I will put it down and go golfing, because I know that after I do that and after I hang out with my friends, I laugh, I have a good time, I'm going to be such a better husband and father, because I'm going to be relaxed. Like if there's something business wise that was bothering me, like, hey, this guy didn't get back to me, or I didn't check this off my list. After I go just hang out, your friends poke fun of you, they make you relax. That stuff just doesn't matter. And then I'm more relaxed, I'm more creative, and then I'm better at business. So by taking a break from it and relaxing, I kind of improve all these aspects of my life.
Mm.
What do you feel like with the guys you're working with in your area of the world? Like, is it similar? Because I really, to me, that's a big problem that, so many guys don't have friends. Are you finding that to be true?
Yeah, particularly, as I said, we've moved around a lot. So traditionally, think about 20 years ago, we'd often grow up and live and work in the same place we grew up in, and now we have such a culture, particularly here. I know so many people on where I live on the Sunshine Coast that aren't from Queensland, and I'm not from Queensland either. And we've all moved around trying to find greener pastures, and then when you have kids, and particularly, and you'd probably know from young kids, and you go through that sickness, tiredness modality for the first 4 or 5 years, and then it starts to get better, and life does become a bit of a autopilot, Groundhog Day. You get up, you've probably been up all night, you get up, go to work, come home, go through the bedtime routine, the witching hours that we call it, and a lot of guys, myself included, just everything else just drops away, and your friends become the guys that just come to the kids' birthday parties or whatever. Like, could be like your partner's friends' husbands, or and that becomes your social network. But as you said, it's really important, and I loved listening to this episode that you did on friendship, because that morning I was fixing up my business cards, because I bought a whole bunch of business cards, and then got a business phone and realized that I had the wrong phone number on it. So then we had to
Oh
get
man.
the old label maker out, and my little son Gussie was helping me do that morning. He was really keen. He loves what I'm doing with the business, and we were listening to your episode, and he goes, "Daddy, what is he talking about?" I said, "Oh, we were talking about the importance of looking after your friendships, and having lots of different friends." And because Gussie, he struggles with that, just having one friend at the moment, and we're trying to tell him, there's lots of kids in your school that you can go and play with, and it's important to branch out, because when your mate, you've had a grumpy day with your mate, there could be other people that you can play with as well. And it was a great, and it reminded me that I've got to do more work here myself, and branch out, because I've got into that modality, that mindset of, I've moved around a lot since high school, and I don't live in where I grew up. And I haven't probably invested as much energy into friendships than I have just family life. So it was a really a good episode for me to wake up as well. But even with the guys that I work with, it's all very similar, moving around for work, or just investing time in the kids, being too tired. But I think there's more to it than that. It could be things like what we're eating, our diets, how are they looking? Are we drinking too much in our culture? Are we too lethargic? Where's our priorities at, and what are our values? These things, like priorities and values, is stuff that I work on with a lot of guys, because they don't know what their values are. They don't know what makes them tick, and what gives them energy, or what they're mindful of, and stuff, so forth. So I do a lot of work in that space to try and help guys reconnect with their own identity on themselves, and also where they can branch out and start socializing more, because, as you said, friendships are really important for that mindset, our general well-being, but also that sense of community, because we are, social people. And I think this networking event that I'm going to, I would have avoided that like the plague. But this is a step for me personally to go, yep, I need to get out there and put myself out there.
Hmm.
Who knows? I might meet my next best friend there. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
But we'll give it a go. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, that's I do jujitsu. I post about it a lot because for me, that's like therapy. I went, I was able to go twice today, which was amazing. Um, but you're anxious beforehand. Someone's choking you out and you're sweating, then you're not anxious afterwards. But besides that, that's a whole different thing. So many of my new good friends I've met at jujitsu. And same thing. My son, his best friends he met at the jujitsu gym, and he goes through the same thing that you're talking about. Having one friend, Nathan had the same problem. Probably still does, but he'll get really close to one kid. That kid will be his best friend, and then any other kid that tries to talk to the other friend, it's like we're gonna brawl because that's my best friend.
Yeah.
So we've had many conversations about, hey, it's more fun to have more friends. Like if I told him, when I was in high school, I had best friends. I had 3 or 4 people that I was really close to that we all hung out together. And I had this group of friends and I had another group of friends. I was in band. I had my band friends. I played basketball. I had my basketball friends. I had people that weren't in anything. I had those friends. It's more fun to have more people. And he's starting to grasp it now, but there was like a period of time a couple of years ago where if any other kid tried to talk to his best friend, it was like, we're fighting.
Yeah. And that's what we're getting with Gus as well,
Yeah.
Like even trying to down to birthday parties, he's got invited to 3 birthday parties on the same day. So now we're going,
Oh my
which
gosh.
ones and there's 2 at the same time at 10 o'clock. And we said to him, mate, which one are you going to go to? This is your decision. It could be the one that you've got your only or your main best friend, but then you've also got this other guy who wants to be your friend as well. And how you're going to navigate that and how you're going to talk about that in a schoolyard as well. It's something that trying to help him through as well. But yeah.
I found that, even with my own friends, it's not always a 50-50 give and take. If I had, after high school and college, let us naturally find each other and contact each other, we'd be contacting each other, once or twice a year. But, and I remember I grew up Catholic and before I got married, we had to do marriage counseling, before you get married. It's like a Catholic thing. Like you have to go and this mentor couple mentors you, then you're allowed to get married. But one thing they said did stick with me, and it was, when you're in a relationship, don't expect it to be 50-50. There's going to be times when you're giving 80 and they're giving 20. It's going to happen. So if you're always expecting it to be 50-50, you're going to be frustrated and disappointed a lot. And I've taken that to also be my friends. Like there's a lot of times when no one's messaging, no one's texting, no one's calling, and I'm the only one doing it. Because I know if I don't do it, they're going to drift away, because most of my relatives, other people, other men I know just say, yeah, I don't have any friends anymore. I'm 30, I'm 40, I'm 50. I don't have any friends. It just happens. Like, no, it doesn't just happen. You let it happen. It's so important. Like, and then other times, maybe I'm the one who's busy and they're going to be the ones doing most of the messaging and calling and organizing events. And that's going to happen. But you have to really be, for me, I got to be really intentional about making sure that, hey, these people are important. I'm not going to let them just slip out of my life, because, it's one missed call, and then you don't talk to them for a month, and then half a year goes by and it's like, oh, what happened? It's like, well, yeah, now you're different people.
Yeah.
It's
and a lot of the stuff that I work with guys in that value space as well, one of the values that comes up a lot is connection and socialization. So even though they might have drifted from their mates, these are the things that are driving us. So these are the things I'm then helping them push back into their lives and say, well, you've got to come that 20% or that 30% or that 50%. Because you're telling me that these are your values and you've just let it slide. So let's reconnect with those values and connect with those social things. And it's same like one of my best mates, he lives in a different state. So one of the great things about Zoom and modern technologies is we have a beer over Zoom, or a coffee over Zoom, depending on what time of day it is, and catch up that way. And it's nice to be there physically, but when you can't, sometimes things like a Zoom call is really good and better than a text
Sure.
or a phone call sometimes as well.
Yeah, we did that at the start of the pandemic. We had a couple of, I think there was an app called House Party, and we would do that, or we would Zoom or something. Not as good as being in person, but better than a text message. I agree.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you talk to me about your coaching business a little bit? So what does it look like? If there's a guy who wants to reach out to you, they're thinking, hey, what this guy's saying really makes sense for me. Like what's your program going to look like for a guy?
Yeah, so it's actually a counseling business as opposed to coaching. So,
Okay.
so I'm a social worker, and working towards my my mental health accreditation in a couple of years as well. But essentially, it's just like going to therapy. But I don't like to call it therapy. I sometimes call it coaching because some guys think that therapy or counseling is a bit of a shame or stigma associated with that. And it's a lot of it's just talking about what's going on and connecting with our values. I like it values-based work because it's really insightful. It gets the focus inwards as well as opposed to outwards. And I bring a lot of mindfulness as well. So mindful men is part coming from my own story of mental illness. So I use a lot of mindfulness techniques to ground myself and be less anxious and be more present with my kids, for example. My mind would often wander and I wouldn't be there with my kids. So mindfulness-based practice helps me to come back to where my feet are. But if it's not talking that guys are interested in, I'm always happy to go for a walk with them, or do a little bit of a pseudo workout, or have a coffee with them at a cafe or whatever. And the whole concept is just getting them talking about things. And I share my story on Mindful Men quite openly because I believe that by me sharing my story, it just promotes that we can talk about mental health issues openly in the open environment. So guys that might be thinking about working with me, but they're not sure, I really recommend them jump onto my socials or the podcast and just hear some of what I talk about, both by myself, but also with guests across the world. Because, we get mindful about more than just, mental health. It's about fatherhood, about identity, parenting in general, seeing the world through our kids' eyes. One of my episodes is with Gus, and we talk about, things about going to the zoo and all that type of stuff as well. I've got one coming up on finances and investing in the stock market. And so all these things impact us and our well-being. So, but some guys just struggle to talk about it. So I'm kind of like that paid friend. If you haven't got someone that you can talk to, you can call me up and we can do a telehealth over the Zoom, or I can come meet you in person if you're local. So, that's pretty much what it is.
So it's like a weekly call, something like that?
Yeah, it could be. It could be a weekly, a fortnightly, a monthly, whatever the client needs, really.
Yeah.
So I do that privately, but I've also worked in the disability space as well. So we have over here the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which is a scheme that people who live with disability can access government funding for therapy or for capacity building support. So I can help people out there, particularly with psychosocial disability. So like things like schizophrenia, PTSD, bipolar, those types of things. I can certainly help them navigate the world of mental health from a disability perspective. And also work cover. So if you get injured at work, both psychologically or physically, I can do some adjustment counseling there as well, just to help clients navigate through that. But it is a dedicated men's service. So it's mindful men for a reason, because I want men to be okay to come to a service.
Yep.
There's a lot out there for women. There's a lot out there for kids. Not as many out there for men. So yeah, I'm just trying to help, I guess, promote men's health and well-being through my practice.
I think it's super needed. There's such a, like you said, I don't know, stigma for some guys, but there's a lot of preconceived notions where that wraps up into the identity issues you were talking about. And guys have to decide, can I still be a strong, masculine leader of my family and get help from someone? It can be an identity crisis. That could be a really hard question that for them, they think, well, if I'm the strong leader of this family or of this business or whatever, then I don't need to get help. Then I don't need to talk to someone. And that's probably a hurdle a lot of guys have to push through.
Yeah. I mean, I did that as well. It took me a long, those were hurdles for me to open up. And it got to a point where the pain of, I love this quote from Tony Robbins. It's change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. And for me, the moment was, it was too painful to stay the same. So I needed to change. I knew I needed to change. And it was just a matter of opening up and saying the words the first time to my doctor, saying, I think I have mental health issues, but the hardest things to say. It's actually 10 years this year that it was since I first opened up about mental health issues. And now it's easy. When I'm struggling, I'll go see my doctor, I'll go see a psychologist or a social worker or a counselor or a coach. I'm starting to look in different coaches, because I like what you said before in terms of you go to jiu-jitsu for therapy. That's kind of like your therapy. Therapy can look different for different people. So some people it's counseling or psychology, other people it's medications, other people it's sport, getting outside, meditation. There's all sorts of range of things you can do as your own personal therapy. Not so much the self-medication like drinking, like that many of us guys do, or taking drugs or whatever. There's breath work. I recently did a breath work class, and I had amazing results from that. I felt so much better afterwards. I've never thought I'd do anything like that. I did men's yoga for a while, and I never thought I'd do men's yoga, but I found it was really relaxing, and and also helped me loosen up the stiff wooden body that I've got. So there is different things for different people, and I'm just one service that people could access. So
yoga is amazing. I wish I still did that. I did that probably 10 years ago, unfortunately, but I was doing it religiously for a year. Got very flexible, and there's this beach body workout called P90X, and it was super successful, but I did it throughout an entire year, lost a lot of weight, got in really good shape. It's really intense, great workout. But they have this hour-and-a-half long yoga workout once a week. And I never felt better than after I did the yoga workouts. I always hated it. I always dreaded doing it because you're just stuck in these impossible positions, and it's so painful, and you're sweating, and it's your thoughts in pain for like 40 minutes straight, and then you get to stretch. So I always dreaded doing it, but once I was done, I just felt so good. I felt on top of the world. And that's one of those things where I just wish I wouldn't have quit doing it.
Yeah, 100%. I used to go there the same. My mind would be racing, and it was a men's yoga, so we weren't exactly flexible. We were all pretty inflexible, actually. But I'd usually get about 3/4 of a way through, and then the penny would drop, and my mind would slow down, and I'd be in the moment. And I'd walk out feeling great, a bit more flexible, and my mind was at ease. So it's something that me too. I haven't been doing it lately, but it's something I'm keen to get back into sooner rather than later.
Yeah, the views aren't as good at the men's yoga class.
What's that? Sorry.
So the views aren't as good at the men's yoga class.
Yes, definitely. And you get a few, there's a few gassy guys in my class as well.
I bet there's a few gassy guys at the jiu-jitsu gym also. That happens. Can I talk to you about your decision to quit your job and start your own business? Because that's a huge decision that you made. I know there's a lot of guys. There's a lot of guys who follow my brand. I'm sure your brand who, they have their own business, but they're still working a full-time job, or they want to start something. Like, what was it that caused you to take that leap?
Well, that's a lifetime story, but I'll give you the short version. So I was living with OCD in my teenage years. Depression and anxiety, just generalized anxiety, came into the fold as well, and I call them my darkest days in those teenage years. I didn't know how to talk about what was going on. My OCD was really bad to the point where it would take me 2 to 3 hours to get to bed because I'd be checking the house constantly because of fear of someone breaking into the house or fear of the house burning down. So say, for example, the iron or stove was left on as well. And through that period, I kind of come to a realization that, you start thinking about what you're going to do as a career as you get older as well, because you're coming into the end of high school, and I thought, I'd love to talk to help people that are going through what I'm going through, because I don't know how to talk about it yet, or I don't even know this is mental health yet, and I didn't know that at the time, but I just felt like I could help in that space. But so I went to uni and started my Bachelor of Social Science, and I did the first year of psychology. I'm like, okay, well, psychologists help people with issues that I'm dealing with. But then it got to the second year of psychology, and I dropped out because I couldn't. There's a maths component that's all statistics based, and I was terrible at maths at school. So I dropped that, and maths in itself gave me a lot of anxiety because I just couldn't get it. So I dropped out of that. I ended up doing anthropology, so the study of culture. But after that, after uni finished, I was jumping on the internet saying, what do social scientists do? And the only thing that was coming up was public service work, so working in the government. So I applied for that, and off I went. For the next 15 years, I've worked in areas like professional, like sports anti-doping. So you've got USADA over there that does all the blood and urine testing for leading up to the Olympics and all that type of stuff. So I was in the Australian version of that, the Australian Sports Anti-Doping Authority, planning doping testing and trying to catch cheats out and all that type of stuff. I've worked in what was called the Australian Border Force here, so immigration. So I've worked in the immigration detention centres. I've worked in fraud analysis and trying to catch people who are doing a dodge on migration programs here. And for the last 4 years, I've been working in disability space, so that NDIS scheme that we talked about a bit earlier, helping people get funding for disability supports. But it was never really like, I had some pretty awesome times and I met some pretty awesome people, but it was never really my passion. So around 2018, I decided, I was feeling a bit stale as well mentally. So I thought I'd go back and do some study, and I came across social work. And then as part of that, I realized that I could become a mental health social worker. And it kind of came back to that 16, 17-year-old in me who wanted to help people with mental health issues. And now as a mature age student, I guess I was a little bit more focused on study. I knew what mental health was because I've been living through it for so long now, and I've been getting help when I needed it. So I started that course as a part-time option. So I was working full-time in my day job. I would study in the evenings and on the weekends. We also had our son around the same time. So he was 1 when I started studying. So I was giving up time with him to go study and figure out how to become a uni student again, and all this type of stuff. So I did that over 4 years, and it got to a point where social work teaches us to question a lot of things about institutions that we work in and stuff like that. So I'd be constantly starting to question, why am I doing this work? How can we do it better? How can we serve people living with disability better? And it got to a point where no matter how many times I would try to instigate change or suggest change for better, because you work in a big institution, you just get ignored, at the lower levels. And I'd actually been feeling like that for probably 10 years of my career, in all the different agencies that I worked in. And so I finished my degree last year, and I wanted to move into private practice, but I had this idea of doing it slowly, like, picking up one day a week of clients and then building up a full, annual salary, try to replace my annual salary because I've got a mortgage and kids are in school and all that type of stuff. But it got to a point where I was kind of burning out again. So I'd burn out the first time in 2020, and then felt like I was burning out at the start of this year as well. My brain was done working in the public service. My heart was in trying to get this business up and running. And it came about in a little bit of a weird way, more of a consumerist way. We put what's it called? We put some money down on a brand new ute, a Toyota Hilux. And so $66,000 car. I never had I had a brand new car, but nothing like that. Kind of like a pickup truck over there. But it was going to be about a 6-month wait list. So we've got a huge wait list since COVID has happened about getting new cars into Australia. And so we had the money sitting in our bank, and I got a bit sick of waiting. So we decided to get a second-hand car instead. So same car, just a bit older, half the price, so 30
Mm-hmm.
grand or whatever. So, and then I said to my wife, well, why don't we use the 30 grand extra that we saved on not getting the brand new car and we got the secondhand car instead? And why don't I just leave my work? Because I was miserable at work,
Mm-hmm.
and it was showing up at home, and I was going to psychology. I was actually on a return to work program
Mm-hmm.
as well, because I was just so mentally just done. And she said, and surprisingly, my wife said, yeah, let's do it. So
It's
I
amazing.
handed that resignation in, and it's been like a huge weight's lifted off my
I'm
shoulders,
sure.
starting up this business, getting the website up and running, setting up networking things now, trying to get my marketing. I'm going to talk to some radio stations here to try and get the word out. And it was a great decision. And it's something that I've been working towards for probably 15 or 16 years. I just didn't
Yeah,
realize it. So
that's amazing. Yeah, I think there's many, many guys in your situation who are miserable at work, who have skills and are holding them inside, not expressing them, not sharing them, but could be.
yeah.
I know some really, really skilled people who keep it all to themselves. And, it's like, man, if you would just share that with people, you could be making a living doing what you love and spending so much time with your family, so much time on yourself,
Mm.
and just living your dream life. It can
Yeah.
happen. And that brings, you said another super important thing, and that was, your wife encouraged you to go. There's a huge niche of people. There's a huge space in the men's world of jilted dads, dads who got divorced, whether rightly or wrongly, and then they, a majority of them, at least in the U.S., lose all parental rights to their kids,
Mm-hmm.
rightly or wrongly. But then there's a very upset group of guys out there who that's happened to them, and they don't have a good opinion of women in general. But if you can do the upfront work of finding a really good woman, then you can find someone that is like a partner with you
Yeah.
and
100%.
help support your dreams. You've got someone who's fueling your dream life, and then together you'll create this dream life because
Yeah.
she's supporting you. She wants you to be the best you. And when you're the best you, you're going to be a better husband, a better father. And so many guys do not have that.
Yeah. And I've been in those relationships where I didn't have it. Like, all the relationships I had, there's one that stands out particularly before my wife is one where we're both from, my hometown, but she was from the well-to-do area and I was from the working class northern suburbs area, and because my parents had split up when I was growing up, she thought that if she stayed with me that was going to be her life and I was going to be separated, and yeah, I had this dirty image of being from the working class and so forth. So I've had those relationships where people have tried to change me from who I am and put me in their box. But when I met my wife Rachel, she was the first person who ever just accepted me for who I was.
Mm.
She doesn't necessarily like that I sometimes I'm off the show with my depression, anxiety, and OCD. But she's not the one to just say, all right, get your stuff and get out. She's like, okay, let's work through it. Figure out what you need. She was the one who pushed me towards, getting therapy the first time and talking to my GP. And I mean, timing is everything though. So like this option wasn't available to us 12 months ago because I was still studying, or even 4 years ago before I started studying. It's happened in we've been together now 14 years or so. And it's just this happened to be the right timing. So sometimes it's just timing, but it's also who you partnered with and being open in your relationship and honest and expressing your feelings, not bottling it up as a guy.
Just some of your work in coaching and the help you give guys, does some of it delve into this kind of relationship problems?
Oh yeah, 100%. So I've worked with guys who super smart, but have lost connection with their partner and kids, maybe because of previous relationships, what happened in those and the trauma associated with those, or had others, in domestic violence situations, and so just helping them navigate through that and rediscovering the good in them. Because over here, that males are typically the perpetrators of domestic violence. There's a lot of statistics out there for that. So trying to navigate that in itself, the shame and stigma associated with, maybe they got violent or angry or whatever, but then helping them come back to that good guy in themselves. And a lot of it's relationship based. It's how they're looking at themselves in their relationship with themselves, but also the people around them. Are they with the right person? Some people in the counseling space or the social work space say you can't tell somebody that they're with the wrong person, but if you were my mate and you were the wrong person, I would tell you. So
some guys are with the wrong person.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean,
some
it's
guys,
amazing.
they're not. Some guys, they don't have a good relationship with themselves.
Yeah.
So it's about balancing that, finding the things that make us spark our values and all that, and then working from there, trying to set goals, set priorities, and go from there.
Yeah, it's there's two different ways to look at that. There's, if you've got a couple, there are relatives or friends, and you can just see that, man, they don't have a good relationship, and maybe the wife is coming off bad. Say, oh, that there's something wrong with the wife, but the guy has the obligation to stand up for himself. He has the obligation to speak his mind, to know himself and be confident with his identity, where he can say, hey, this is who I am. Right now, you're not treating me well. You're not letting me do what I want to do, what's best for me as a person. So for me, whenever I see, I think it's really common. You've got, a guy married to a wife, and then a lot of times, the wife will talk down on the husband, in parties or friends or anything. The husband just kind of takes it. That's, to me, I don't blame the wife. I blame the husband. I say, you're letting her do that. You have grown this relationship to where that is normal, and that's now part of who you guys are. That's you guys. You guys treat each other that way now, and if you want to fix that, you should. But man, it's going to be a lot of work. You're deep into a road that is hard to fix. But unless you want to be miserable the rest of your life and be that guy, who retires, goes to the golf course, and never sees his wife, doesn't want to see her, and is miserable all the time, like, you better make some changes quick.
Yeah, and I think some of it comes down to that gender identity and gender roles, and what we're talking about is that, who are we in 2022 as guys? Like, some guys are still stuck in that traditional patriarchy. I'm the breadwinner, I'm the boss in the household. In some households that works. I'm not saying that that's the worst thing in the world, but in other households, like my household, it's more of an equal thing. So what am I doing? What domestic chores am I doing? Am I cleaning the house? Am I picking kids up from school? Am I doing my fair share of the cooking? All that type of stuff. And where our family works is that we have that balance to the point where, if I want to leave my job and no longer be the breadwinner because I was on more money than my wife, that's okay, because my wife would, picks up an extra shift and I'll get this business up and running again. She's there supporting me to do that. So it's about looking at that relationship with ourselves, our identity. Like, why are we in the relationship to start with? Is it the best thing for us? Are we on the same page, whatever that page looks like, and then working together to make things better? Yeah.
Have you ever told a guy that it might be time for a change?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Wow. But they were, I think they didn't want to lose their kids. They were in that mode. So what
do you do? I mean, what do you do? Because I know guys like that who have kids, they're married, and everyone knows, like, they shouldn't be together.
Yeah, it's hard because you want to nurture the counseling, coaching relationship with the client. Also, you don't want them to just go out and do something drastic that they probably haven't thought through. But a lot of it comes down to self-realization. You need to be the person as the client or as anything to realize, like I did back 10 years ago, okay, now's the time I need help. You need to come to that realization, because when you come to the realization, you own it 100%. That's your realization. And then someone like me is just help you through that process and navigate that process. But unfortunately, a lot of people, and guys in particular, struggle to make that decision that, okay, I've got to do this because whatever's working now, it just isn't working. But so it's a self-discovery process, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, that would be an impossible crisis, especially if you're very close with your kids.
Yeah.
And, for me, the thought of leaving or losing my kids is like life ending. It's like, then I don't have a life anymore because they're such a big part of it. So I just can't imagine being in that situation. And then sometimes partners change. You can be married to someone, have kids, 10 years passes, and they're a completely different person.
Yeah.
And I just can't imagine being in that situation and having to decide, well, hey, do I stick this out and be miserable for the rest of my life, but keep my kids, or make a change? That to me, that's an impossible decision to make.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there are families out there that where parents split up, they get divorced, but they're still an active part of the relationship with the children as well. So yes, the child safety, or not child safety, the divorce, the family court system isn't great. And we have it here. It's not great here in Australia. It's often tailored towards the mums taking control and so forth. And I've heard so many dads talk about the challenges of going through that system, the family court system. But it is possible, there is hope. If that's a path you've got to take, then that's a path sometimes you just got to take. Because sometimes the path that we take might be harder than sitting around keeping the same or whatever. But in the long term, the results are much better for us and our families as well. So,
have you worked with guys who have lost their kids like that?
Not for a while. It's been a little while. Probably more guys who are in the process of losing their kids, not so much have lost their kids. But I've got circles of people that I talk to where we talk about it more generally, as not so much from a counselling perspective, but just from a colleague or peer perspective, and it's traumatizing, And as a dad myself, my heart bleeds, like what you said, like the thought of losing my kids is terrifying. So I can't imagine what another person, another dad's going through, trying to make those really tough decisions. To make the move away. Yeah.
Yeah, I know from the various dad groups I'm in and different accounts I follow, there's parental rights experts and lawyers in the dad space. And it does seem like the court system is pretty far stacked to the mom side here in the US, but you said it's the same thing in Australia.
Yep. Definitely.
Do you have from your past, do you have any insight into why that is? I know you mentioned domestic abuse is majority male. Do you have any insight into that?
I would say that's probably one of the drivers is, and traditional, when we look at traditional households, it's mums have been the stay-at-home mums, the ones that stayed home throughout those early baby to 5 years old until the kids go to school. For example, our childcare system over here, while we get some subsidized childcare, like for me to pay for that, you're almost negating your entire wage pretty much for the child to go into childcare and for you to go to work, to the point where it's often better for one of the parents to stay home full time and do the childcare in those first 0 to 5 years before they go to school, because it's just financially not viable. And in a lot of the cases, that's the mum that does that. The dad goes to work, whether or not it's the dad's making more money usually, or it could be that the dad doesn't feel confident to stay at home and look after the kids. I know I had a period of time where I didn't have the confidence to look after my son when he was home. I really struggled with the feeding, for example, and the sleeping, whereas my wife, it just became a bit more natural. So I'd made the decision to stop doing the stay-at-home dad stuff and went back to work, and it was a bit different for my daughter. So I was more comfortable with my daughter doing it, and she slept better as well. So all sorts of different things, but I think it's tailored towards mums for those those kinds of reasons, that dads often go back to work really quickly. We have maternity leave over here, which is tailored towards mums, not so much for dads. Until we can get some more equalisation in access to that, which we're moving towards. But yeah, I think there's some of the reasons, and they're only some of the reasons why it would be tailored towards mums over dads.
You mentioned that it's subsidized in some way. What do you mean?
Yep. So, for example, it might cost, say, $100 to send your kids to daycare for a day. The government, if you earn a certain amount of money in your household, like you're as a couple, or even if you're a single parent, the government, depending on how much you earn, the government then chips in some of that money. So it might turn into you pay 60 and the government pays $40, for example, for a day. But we're reflecting on our childcare. It costs up to between $10,000 to $15,000 a year for a child to be in childcare.
Yep.
But once they hit school, that's halved, or if not, $3,000, I think, for our kid for Gus to go to school. Or if you go to a public school, it's even less. So Gus goes to a Catholic school, so it's a Catholic private school. So it's a little bit more expensive than a public school. But yeah, these are the things that parents are grappling with, and they do impact your relationship with each other. And the financial stress is a big one. And we've got inflation growing at a rapid rate across the world. We're not immune to it here. House prices, we've got a housing crisis in Australia. We've got more people looking to try and rent, and there's the cost of rent is just extortionate. But then they can't get into the property market with a mortgage and so forth. So these are some of the things that are fueling, I guess, family dysfunction as well.
Yeah, we think we have our own housing issues here in the U.S. I think it's probably worldwide. It was great for a little bit, but now it's making a turn. So it's good time to be in a house, but not a good time to be looking for one.
Definitely, yeah.
So to kind of wrap things up here, what do you see as if you can give a guy an actionable thing to take from this podcast? Like you mentioned, you had mindfulness tips.
Yep.
If we could leave on that, like what if someone's listening and they have anxiety, stress, racing thoughts, or just any issues that you're seeing day to day with people you work with? Like, what are some concrete tips guys can go home and do?
Yeah, I mean, the best one is to open up. It's to go recognize that you need help in some way or another. And whether or not that's talking to your partner, talking to your friends, going to see a doctor, saying this is what's troubling me, and then work out a strategy from there. So in Australia, we get access to mental health care plans, for example, which is again subsidised from the government, who can access psychologists for a little bit less funding, or counsellors or social workers. So if you can't do that, though, because talking is hard for a lot of blokes out there, become mindful of who you are as a person. So an easy way to do it is grab a piece of paper, put it into quadrants. You could have family, work, parenting, mental health, physical health, whatever all these quadrants, what are the major areas in your life are. And just write down how you feel about those areas, what's happening in those areas. Are you happy in those areas? Like if you're miserable at work, what can you do to address that? Can you find another employer? Do you need to study like I did, to change your career path? If it's your relationship, are you going on date nights? Are you mindful of how you're interacting with your partner? With your kids, are you really present with your kids, or are you looking at your phone, scrolling through Instagram or Facebook or whatever when your kids are playing in front of you? Are you mindful about your physical health? So are you walking? Are you running? Are you going to the gym? Are you doing jiu-jitsu? Are you going swimming, doing the things you like? Are you getting outside, particularly getting some vitamin D? Same with your eating, same with your drinking. Are you drinking too much in Australia or across the world? So this is what I call mindfulness. It's being mindful of who we are in those different areas, and then where you're perhaps lacking, it's finding support in those areas. So if it's your mental health, is it seeing a psychologist, a counselor, social worker? Or if it's your physical health, going to a gym, signing up for a gym, or a coach, a life coach, if you're looking at different areas. Or you want to start a business, finding a business coach, finding people who understand you, but also can fill your cup in different areas, whether it's knowledge, well-being, physical health, and all that type of stuff. So yeah, they're the two main ones. It's one, talk if you can. If you can't, be mindful of who you are, and plug the gaps where you can see them.
Excellent. What would you like people to know about you, and where can they find you?
Yeah, so the best place is my website. So that's it talks about my counseling stuff for in Australia, but also my socials as well. So the podcast and my Instagram and all that. So it's www.mindful-men.com.au. And yeah, if you follow me on Instagram or listen to the podcast or whatever, let me know how you like it or what you want to hear from, and yeah, get into that type of stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was excellent. I love talking to you.
Chris, thanks so much.
Do it again.
I'd love to do it again. I'd love to have you on the Mindful Men podcast when you get time, mate. And yeah, I love what you're doing. Keep doing it, because it's important for more of us men to open up and be mindful of who we are and how we can grow. So
absolutely. All right, we'll talk soon, bud.
Cheers, buddy.